Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 269, and today we continue the debate about where on Earth we're going, including Gandalf's response to Boromir's, the most critical thing that Boromir has said yet. As Boromir is beginning to speak his mind a little bit more fully, we will see Gandalf's response to that. Yeah, excellent. Oh, hey, congratulations, Bannock's Baker. It's always good to see people who have caught up and are joining us live for the first time. That's always a lot of fun. The further we get along on this journey, the harder it is, I know, to catch up. And, I'm minded of all those things that Bilbo says about the road, right? About the road going on forever and, that line in the song, now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with weary feet. I know that's Frodo's version, but anyway, so there we are. Anyhow, a couple quick announcements tonight. First, I wanted to we're getting towards the fall moot season now. So our next moots that are coming up, we've got some really exciting stuff coming and more in the pipeline that we're working on for the coming spring. But we are coming to the Pacific Northwest finally. We're going to do Cascade Moot in September in Portland. And I'm so excited to go to Portland. I've never been to the Pacific Northwest at all in my life. So I'm really excited to be there and to meet many of you there for Cascade Moot in September. And then we're going to go back to Iowa for Middle Moot, always our longest running moot. And that is always so much fun to go to. And then we're gonna be back here in New England Moot here in New Hampshire, which is going to be a lot of fun. Kind of leaning into, we're going to be near Halloween, so we're kind of leaning into the spooky theme for that one. We're going to be after that we're going back to Denver. So the beginning of November we'll be in Denver. For Mountain Moot again. Looking forward to getting back to the Rockies. I was just visiting the Rockies this past weekend. Was in Montana for the first time. What a beautiful place. Wow. I've rarely been so floored by scenery as I was just being in Montana. It was amazing. But back to Mountain Moot in Denver, which is going to be awesome. That's in November. And then we're going down for something completely different, geographically speaking, to New Orleans for Bayou Moot at the beginning of December. And then, of course, Aranas Osmoot down in Sydney in January, and Sunshine Moot in February, I think, this year. So, anyway, it is going to be a fun moot season. So, lots of things going on and more coming up. We should be able to announce soon. We're almost settled on the details for Potomac Moot. We're going to do a regional moot in the Mid-Atlantic region, in the DC area in Virginia. We're going to do. We're looking to get back to the southeast, get back down south again. We're looking to do Magnolia Moot again. We are still thinking about, we're trying to get SoCal Moot going in the spring too. Yep, we're deciding on a date for that one. Yep. So back to probably the San Diego area. I'm looking at maybe going back to Carlsbad again, same place we were last time for SoCal Moot. And of course, we're still working on getting a Europe moot together. We still want that to happen. And in addition, we are also making some really fun plans for a Brazil moot next year, probably next summer in the Northern Hemisphere. Anyway, Yeah, all kinds of fun things going on in the moot calendar. So I just wanted to make sure that those things were on your radar screen. Another thing I wanted to put on your radar screen, though, I'm not going to talk about it in more detail for a while. I was talking at MythMoot about some really fun things that we're going to be doing with Signum Press and Signum Studios moving into this fall. And again, I'll give more details about this later on, but I'm really excited. We have been doing Signum Press stuff for a year, and we are going to be sort of continuing to the next stage of our press experiment, building on what we've learned from the past year, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to telling you more about that when we finalize more details. But big things coming up through both studios and press together, and a new opportunity to experience it all. So gonna be a great time. Looking forward to that. All right, let us continue. I wanted to begin with the always modestly perilous undertaking of rereading the previous slide. And I'm doing this, we pretty much finished talking about this slide, but I'm rereading this because in real time it's been 3 weeks and I barely remember what we were talking about. So let us take the risk of rereading this slide and then moving on to the next one. Since our open attempt on the mountain pass, our plight has become more desperate, I fear. I see now little hope if we do not soon vanish from sight for a while and cover our trail. Therefore I advise that we should go neither over the mountains nor round them, but under them. That is a road at any rate that the enemy will least expect us to take. We do not know what he expects, said Boromir. He may watch all roads, likely and unlikely. In that case, to enter Moria would be to walk into a trap, hardly better than knocking at the gates of the Dark Tower itself. The name of Moria is black. Okay. So, all right. Yes, Jackie, I have to think that Tolkien was kind of chuckling when he wrote that sentence. Right? The name of Moria is black. 'Cause I mean, it's literally true, right? I mean, that's like a philologist dad joke, that sentence, right? Of course, Moria means the black pit, really just like the black place, essentially, right? I mean, the MOR prefix is really kind of like, that's pretty much the right, Blackia, exactly. Bjorning, I agree with you that if this is Boromir exasperated, he's still quite well spoken. Absolutely. Fourth Thomas asks how many people would have gotten that joke at the time. On the first reading, very few. There have been some hints already, right? I mean, the MOR word piece is one of the easiest to get just from the context of the, they're always talking about Mordor and the Black Land. Anyway, there are lots of places like that where you can get, it's very easy to get from context. I mean, I think from my own memories and from conversations I've had with others, for many people, figuring out that MOR means black is one of the first steps that like new readers take in figuring out the elf languages, because we get it in a couple contexts. We get it with Moria, we get it with Mordor, and what's more, we have Mordor and Gondor, right next to each other, and with the names closely parallel, right? And you can begin to sort of see how these word elements go together. Tolkien does a great job of putting that, embedding that stuff into the narrative and making it possible. He's also really good at making sure you don't have to, like, if you don't care, if you're wholly uninterested in the languages, you don't need to be in order to get it, right? There's nothing you're gonna lose from the story, in the sense of just like, parts of the story that themselves will be completely like over your head because you're not, you're not piecing together or decoding, right, the language bits. But the language bits are there, and it certainly does enrich it to be able to see that and understand that. Arden Crayon, what Khazad-dûm literally translates to is the Dwarodelf, the dwarf diggings. That's again, there comes a point when you're reading Tolkien when you suddenly realize Tolkien is literally giving the translation. Like, he will often do things like that. To Khazad-dûm, the Dwarodelf. And it sounds like at first glance, you're like, okay, so that's its name in Dwarvish, and that's its name in, the common speech. Well, I wonder what the Dwarvish name means. And there comes that moment when you're like, oh, wait, the common speech, that's what it means, right? It's just a translation, right? So Arden Crayon, you would think that the name Khazad-dûm could apply to all dwarf minds. They are all dwarf delved, right? But that's kind of the point. Like, this is the delving of the dwarves, right? The greatest, the foremost, the, none of the others even sort of count compared to, exactly. The others are a Dwarodelf. This is the Dwarodelf. Absolutely. That's pretty much the effect here. Anyway, so yes, the name of Moria is black is just a delightful sentence. However, recalling some of the things we were saying last time about Boromir, as I said, this is one of the first times Boromir is getting chippy, right? Now, I agree with Bjorning that he's still being polite, right? He's not being rude. He's not being aggressive. He's not even directly, he's not exactly challenging Gandalf's authority. He's not even doing what he might feel himself warranted to do, which is to point to the sketchy leadership record that Gandalf has shown so far, right, on this trip. He has a list, I think, by now, of moments when the leadership of this ragtag company has not only failed to cover itself in glory, but has failed to demonstrate what I suspect Boromir would consider basic competence, right? But he's not doing that either, right? He's not saying okay, mister, let's cross over the Alpine mountains in January. No, like he's not doing any of that stuff. But he does here contradict more firmly than he did before. Remember, he began the first part of his objections here with, I do not understand all this, right? There he was questioning, he was literally questioning, like, why can't we do this? So he was questioning Gandalf's suggestions, but he couched it in terms of his own lack of understanding, right? Like, none of this makes sense to me. Right. Perhaps you could explain why it does not make most sense for us to take the most obvious routes, right, towards Minas Tirith. But now, by leading with, we do not know what he expects. He is being more aggressive, more abrasive even than he was. But abrasive isn't quite fair. Again, it's still... He's not being impolite yet. But he is calling Gandalf for the first time on something that he clearly disagrees with, calling him on it directly. Gandalf has just said, that is a road at any rate that the enemy will least expect us to take. And Boromir says, we do not know what he expects. You're guessing there. Do you have knowledge about what Sauron knows? And exactly what Sauron will expect? Like, maybe. But as he says, he may watch all roads, likely and unlikely. And here I think Boromir has a pretty good point. There aren't so very many roads across the mountains. And are we really going to bank on the fact that Moria will be totally unwatched, just because it's unlikely that somebody would try to go that way. And I don't want to lose sight of that initial objection that Boromir makes. Because I think when we come around to Gandalf's next response, when we actually start the slide we're talking about today, we'll see. I'm kind of with Boromir here a little bit. Like I don't think that Gandalf's refutation of this is very strong at all. The last thing we were emphasizing last time, to enter Moria would be to walk into a trap hardly better than knocking at the gates of the Dark Tower itself. And we were talking about the way in which he's indirectly throwing shade on their entire quest, right? Yeah, going into Moria, if Moria is guarded, it's a complete death trap. So we're gambling on the idea that it's not going to be watched or guarded for some reason, right? Doing that would be really stupid. Do you know how stupid it would be? It would be so stupid that the only thing stupider than that would be, I don't know, taking the ring right into the middle of Sauron's stronghold and knocking at his gates, right? I mean, that's how stupid it would be to go through Moria. Yeah. So, there is a big difference between knocking on the door and sneaking in. Yes, there is. For that reason, his reference here is sufficiently indirect that, as we see, Gandalf is he's not going to rise to that directly, right? Gandalf isn't going to rise to that challenge directly. But I think, again, when you combine two of the things that we were looking at in Boromir's response, one, the fact that all of his proposed paths go straight to Minas Tirith, right? He is clearly, at the least assuming, at the most actively angling for the company to go through Minas Tirith. That it would be an assumption that, Minas Tirith is the gateway to Mordor, from the west, is totally natural. Again, I don't think that this has to imply any, ill will or devious schemes or anything on Boromir's part. But yeah, that's perfectly natural. That he is not on board with the, hey, let's do the thing that seems foolish and hopeless, because that's what the enemy will least expect, and because, we just have to trust that that's going to work out if we do it, right? The let's do this because it seems like the worst possible idea kind of plan that Elrond and Gandalf were proposing at the council. It does not seem. I see no reason to believe that Boromir is on board with it, even now. Again, I don't believe that means, as I said last time, that he is conspiring to take the ring for himself. I don't believe that that's the case yet. But yeah, Evil Dr. Cannon, you're right. Boromir is sensible, but not very good at listening to the music. That's the part that he's not getting. The not just the level of Estel that's required by the, Elrond and Gandalf strategy, but the sort of Estel, right? He doesn't see what exactly are we trusting in and why, right? Why should we think that this is the right plan? And Kurtzimus is another thing I would add. Kurtzimus asks, other than ring reasons, why does Boromir stay? And Arnos said Aragorn reasons, which I agree. He is coming with Aragorn to Minas Tirith, and I think for lots of reasons. No matter with what percentage of his innermost heart Boromir is supportive of Aragorn's claim. I think it may be less than Frodo and Faramir say in their conversation later, but I don't think it's zero. Whatever the percentage is, whether it's small or whether it's large, in either case, he's going to want to get to Minas Tirith when Aragorn does, right? But also, in addition, he would also want to help. It's clear that he's trying to be helpful, that he feels a certain responsibility here. He is the path of the company, obviously, goes through Minas Tirith. How else would you get to Mordor from the west? And he's going that way anyway. For him to just abandon them, be like, anyway, y'all keep Isildur's Bane. You guys are too slow, and anyway, you guys are going. I'm just gonna go down to the Gap of Rohan because y'all are straight crazy, wanting to go through Moria, right? He could, in theory, do that. Like, he has no oath that compels him to do anything otherwise. But yet, it would be. I think it would clearly be a failure. He would have a hard time, I think. And I think that he sees some responsibility of there's a sense, isn't there, of some of his contributions so far, that he sees himself as like the adult in this group to some extent. If you see what I mean, that's a little strong. But if you see what I mean by that, he's like the whole mountaineering thing, right? If we're going to go up over the mountains where we all might die of hypothermia, maybe we should bring firewood. That might be a good idea, right? And then later on, so we're all on the cusp of dying of hypothermia, or at least the hobbits are. Maybe we should now light the wood that we brought up against just such an emergency, right? Again, I'm not saying that he is the adult in the room. But again, from his own experience, he has been in charge. He is used to being the one in charge and the one making the decisions. And he seems, as far as we can tell, a good leader. I mean, we have no reason to believe that Boromir is not, in fact, an excellent leader. Grayestown, yes, he's very much the older brother, right? So what I'm saying is, again, I'm trying to imagine, even ignoring any question of the attraction of the ring to Boromir, which I do suspect that he's feeling, but I think he's not giving into that yet. I don't see any evidence to believe that his words and actions are being motivated by his desire for the ring in any kind of active way yet. And yet, even in the absence of that, even if we imagine a complete absence of that, it's hard to imagine how Boromir would not consider it a deep failure, even an act of cowardice or possibly betrayal, for him to just go off and be like, well, peace out, folks. I'm going to the Gap of Rohan. Have fun in Moria, right? Yeah. And yes, Bjarnason, that seems perfectly fair to me. That his words and actions are motivated by thoughts that later get turned into rationale for taking the ring. Absolutely. Yes, they will be. We can see, I think, the foundations that those thoughts will build on, but he's not there yet. Yeah. And Matt, I don't know why Aragorn and Gandalf don't suggest bringing the wood, right? Yeah. And yes, I agree with Aranos that Boromir isn't AWOL from Gondor, from the army. He is absent on deployment. Yeah, he was sent, he was given the quest by the Lord of the City. Is he needed back home? Yes, he absolutely is. But he recognizes between there's this dude coming back who claims to be the heir of Isildur, and the returning king. So maybe I ought to keep an eye on that guy for one way or not, for one reason or another, right? Like no matter whether he is or whether he isn't, I should keep an eye on him. Oh, and two, like Isildur's bane, the one ring to rule them all is also here. Maybe I should escort that to Gondor, right? That might be an important thing to do. Yeah. So, yeah. Abelard, yeah, the whole mighty gift thing, that's a Denethordism, right? And yeah, we'll talk more about that when we get closer to that. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, I know I'm missing stuff here. Right. Two Juice Man was saying we're not really seeing the Amdir Estel conflict. Boromir personifies Amdir, and in the end, he is slain. Yeah, I'm not sure I would say it's not exactly just a personification. I think that, but yeah, he is certainly thinking in more practical terms. He is certainly, but again, I don't think it's not. I'm trying to identify why I'm not comfortable with that. Why I'm not fully comfortable with it. Again, it kind of works in some ways. But here's the problem. The problem is I don't think that Boromir is rejecting Estel in favor of Amdir. I think he just doesn't get the Estel applicability, right? Estel is not the same as mere fatalism. It's not just like, well, let's just do whatever because whatever is going to happen, right? That's not Estel. Estel is trust. But trust in what? And for what? Right? And on the basis of what? Right? It's one thing to say, have Amdir, Estel. No, that doesn't work. Estel is having Amdir, but it's different. It's one thing to say, have Estel, Boromir. But what does that mean? How does that translate to, so let's take the ring to Mordor and try to destroy it there, right? You can have Estel and not see that plan, right? Not see how that fits in. And Abelard, that's exactly correct. Estel is usually served up with Providence. That's exactly right. The basis of Gandalf and Elrond's plan is on their perception of Providence. It's all, it starts, at least we first see it, with what Gandalf says to Frodo back in chapter 2 of book 1, right? That Frodo was meant to have the ring. This idea, this perception of Providence, right? That something is moving events in this direction. We can perceive the direction in which Providence is moving events. And so therefore, we are going to place our Estel, our hope and trust in the power, that other power at work, which is moving events, having perceived the direction in which Providence seems to be going. And I don't see any reason to believe that Boromir sees it, that Boromir believes that or thinks that way. And yes, Bill Huggins, the people of Gondor are aware of Iluvatar and the Valar. We will definitely see some of that stuff. But yes, I don't think that Boromir would agree. I don't. The reason I think that he's not on the same page, the reason I think he's still not really down with the Mordor plan for the ring. Although he's, he knows when he's outvoted, right? And he knows when he's an outsider and frankly a marginal figure, as he was in the Council of Elrond, right? But so he didn't say anything. He's not causing trouble. He's being a good soldier, but he, I don't think, was convinced. I don't know. I don't think that Boromir is anti-Estel. I think he might even have Estel. I just think his premises would be different. In some ways, I think that his belief in Gondor is based on Estel. I bet you that Boromir has Estel, that Gondor will not fail, that Gondor will not be destroyed. That, I think, is where Boromir's Estel lies. That's what he would have grown up learning, right? About the history of Gondor, and it's going back to Numenor, and from the through line that starts with the heroes of the Edain of the First Age, through the great and glorious kingdom of Numenor, through the last of the faithful who escape from the downfall of Numenor, all the way through the glorious history of Gondor, and ending in him personally, right? Yeah, that I think would be what his Estel is sort of founded in. And of course, if it were true, right? If it were true that's if that were right, if Boromir's Estel is grounded in Gondor and Gondor's survival, well, guess what? It's not wrong, right? That's going to pan out. If he has Estel in that, it will turn out that his Estel was well placed. Yeah, but anyway, right, Matt, that's exactly it. It is easy when you start doing the I'm going to interpret Providence thing, right? There are lots of possible interpretations. The ring has come into our possession just now for a reason, right? Just at the moment of the greatest need of Gondor, when we seem to be opposed by an enemy whom now we are far, well, I won't say we're weak, because Boromir wouldn't say that, but whose strength is insufficient to withstand the attack of the enemy. They do need help, as he admitted at the council. And what has Providence brought them? Great help, right? Maureen, there you go. Exactly. He has this dream, right? And his dream sends him off on this quest. And when he finishes where does the quest lead him? The Ring of Power, right? There it is. And the sword. Yeah, I know that's what it was actually about. But I'm just saying, we're Boromir. This is what that Providence could easily look like, right? Yeah. So, Bjorning, this is why this is what I'm trying to get to, is where how I don't think Boromir, like Boromir versus Aragorn, really fits into the an Amdir Estel divide. I'm trying to work out why, like my impulse there, my reaction to that was no, that doesn't work, and I'm trying to think that through and see if I agree with that impulse or not, and I think I do. This doesn't mean that I think that Boromir's assessment is correct. I don't. but I suspect that he would say that it's based on based on Estel. It'd help if I could actually say the right words. That it's based on Estel, and I think he would be right to say that. Can you have Estel in the wrong thing? You absolutely can. You absolutely can. It is true I'm suspicious of the allegory to some extent. That is, any kind of a more purely allegorical reading is always going to be reductionist. That's what Tolkien didn't like about it. But yeah, I think I think that he does believe in Estel, and I absolutely do believe. I absolutely do believe that. I absolutely do believe that you can have wrongly directed Estel. Estel is merely, it's hope, faith, trust. You can place your faith and trust in the wrong things, and hope that it is founded upon that faith and trust could be wrong. Definitely. Yeah. Anyway, yes. So Bjorning, that's exactly what I'm getting at. The idea of Estel, which we've always regarded as unequivocally good, can be misleading or misconstrued. Yes. Yeah. No, I absolutely think so. Again, Estel is good, but it has to be based on the. I mean, you have to be placing your trust in the right thing, right? Almeria, I was going to not go there, but let's go ahead and go there. Is it possible that, like, Sauron's followers have Estel in him? I think that they could very well operate on a kind of Estel. I'm not saying that they do. I don't know of any evidence to believe that they do. That might not be a kind of relationship that, in fact, is a thing. But, like, can I theoretically imagine that? Yeah, I can theoretically imagine that. But again, I'm trying to think of any moment where we can see that kind of trust being placed in, and I don't really see it. Yeah, Abelard, I'm thinking about his cults in the East, which is one of the reasons that I'm thinking about this. Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Bjarnasonar, as far as we can see, the servants of the enemy that we hear from are all driven by self-interest or by fear, or even by the dominating will of Sauron himself. I agree. I don't... I'm trying to think of anybody who does anything else. Yeah. Oh, that's a fascinating question, Ardent Crayon. Does Gollum have Estel that he will find the precious again? No, I don't think he does. I don't think he has Estel. I don't think that there is something that he is trusting in and relying upon. Gollum is driven by this gnawing desire, right? With Estel, yeah, Gollum is driven by need, not hope. Yeah, he's driven by fear, anxiety, distress. With Estel comes peace. I mean, that's, yeah. Yeah. Boromir's horn. What a fascinating thought. Sauron teaches the Númenóreans Estel in Morgoth. That's the closest I can think of. the teaching, what we hear of them in the Akalabeth, the teaching of when Sauron is teaching Pharazôn about Lord of the Dark, right? Yeah, I don't think it's the same either. And it is false, surely. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't work, right? But that seems to be the kind of model that he's building. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same. We'll get there. And Bjarna's Honor, one of the places we'll get is to the slide we're going to talk about tonight. But as usual, a worthwhile side trip. Okay. You speak of what you do not know when you liken Moria to the stronghold of Sauron, answered Gandalf. I alone of you have ever been in the dungeons of the Dark Lord, and only in his older and lesser dwelling in Dol Guldur. Those who pass the gates of Barad-dûr do not return. But I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. If there are orcs there, it may prove ill for us, that is true. But most of the orcs of the Misty Mountains were scattered or destroyed in the Battle of Five Armies. The Eagles report that orcs are gathering again from afar, but there is a hope that Moria is still free. There is even a chance that dwarves are there, and that in some deep hall of his fathers, Balin son of Fundin may be found. However it may prove, one must tread the path that need chooses. Okay. So, this speech by Gandalf, I personally find about 80% unconvincing. That is pretty much everything up until the last sentence I find unconvincing. There are kind of two different parts, I would say, to his response. First is when he's addressing the comparison with Barad-dûr, right? The second is when he is giving reasons for hope. And this is clearly Umdir hope, right? That things are going to turn out fine in Moria. And when he starts listing reasons to feel optimistic about this expedition, it's super weak, right? I mean, if there are orcs there, it may prove ill for us. Yeah, it certainly might. If the place is swarming with orcs, it might not be great. But most of the orcs of the Misty Mountains were scattered or destroyed in the Battle of Five Armies. Yeah, several orc generations ago. And we learned Frodo heard rumors in the Shire years ago that the orcs have been returning to the Misty Mountains, right? Now, Gandalf does say the Eagles report that orcs are gathering again from afar, right? He's like, admittedly, you've probably heard that orcs are have not only regained their numbers over the generations, but they're actually gathering. Not even so it's not only the orcs who live there that we might have to deal with. It's like import orcs, right? But then he adds, but there is a hope that Moria is still free. Really, Gandalf? What are the percentages on that? Exactly, right? Yes, we know for a fact, we've been told for a fact that orcs are gathering from afar in the Misty Mountains. But, yeah, I mean, they're probably not in Moria, right? I'm sure it's fine. Really? Okay. That seems weak, but weaker still is the next step. There is even a chance that dwarves are there. Yeah. Really small chance. It's been how many years since the people in Erebor heard anything from the dwarves? I mean, everyone was assuming at the council that, the dwarves are, they're all presumed dead at this point, right? So he first makes a weak argument, and then he follows it up with a weaker argument. Then he finally says the one thing that makes sense, right? His argument, like the first sentence and the last sentence of it, work for me. But I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. However it may prove, one must tread the path that need chooses. Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you there. That's the Estelle argument. One must tread the path that need chooses. Look, from where Gandalf is sitting, the Moria choice is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. There is no other option. We are being pursued. If we go by the long southward, there is no chance we're going to escape. We are going to be found by the enemy, and he's going to recover the ring. That's not an option. And it's going to take too long anyway. Not a year. He's exaggerating, I think, but yeah. And since we're back to Moria or Rivendell, Gandalf really believes that at this point, the path that has been opened in front of them, there's only one path, and that's Moria. It has to be Moria. The only other candidate was Caradhras in January, which was a bad candidate, but still, by Aragorn's argument, better than this one, right? But when it was proven that that door is absolutely closed, then we do the one thing that is left, and we trust in it. We walk into Moria with Estelle, believing that this is the thing we're supposed to do, that getting to Mordor with the ring is the thing that we're supposed to do, and that if this is what we're supposed to do, then a way will be made open to us. And as bad as it looks, this is the only way that is being made open to us. And so therefore, this is the way that we should go. That's an argument I can buy, right? Maybe there won't be any orcs, and maybe the dwarves aren't all dead. That's not an argument that I can buy. Yeah. Ilamur, I don't know that Gandalf is actively trying to avoid Minas Tirith, but he certainly does not share Boromir's assumption that the road goes through Minas Tirith. Yeah. Interesting. Fourth Dauntless is wondering, returning to the Estelle point, isn't it possible that the message here is to go south? That is, like, if we're playing the game as Gandalf seems to be, right? What are we being told? What is the providential message here, right? Caradhras is closed. And Fourth Dauntless says, maybe the message is, southward road doesn't look great, admittedly, right? But taking it through the Gap of Rohan, risky, admittedly risky, right? But you know what else is risky? Moria, right? So it seems to me that Gandalf's rationale, that his feeling here, his conclusion, is based on he has a clear and positive reason to believe that going south to the Gap of Rohan is a bad idea. There is a lot of reason to fear what's going to happen in Moria. But it's unknown. And that's what he emphasizes here. We don't know about orcs. We don't know about the dwarves. We're pretty sure the dwarves are dead. We have every reason to believe there are orcs there, but we don't know any of that, right? Moria, so to speak, is a black box, right? Man, I can see why Tolkien loved that name. Like, it just keeps paying off all the time. Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of known unknowns. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, yeah. And Dizzy, you're right. His general approach is to do the unpredictable. Yeah, that's exactly right. Also, remember, based on how Gandalf talks, and even how Elrond talks in the council, their decisions are not purely driven by reason, right? It's not just a matter of thinking it through and running the numbers, you know? There is also simply their conviction based on their familiarity with the music, right? And I don't just mean, in fact, in this case, I don't mean at all Gandalf as a Loren who would have been there and participated in the music of the Ainur at the beginning. I don't know that Gandalf even retains memories of that in his body right now. I mean his perception of the music in the same way Elrond has perceived the music, right? When you hang around for a few thousand years and you watch how things work out, you get a sense for how these things go, right? So again, I think that Gandalf's analysis here is not just a logical analysis. It's also, and again, if you think back, this is how he talks, he says things like, a shadow fell on my heart then, right? It's not about, like, I thought it through and I came to this really firm conclusion. Yeah. I Gildalo and I agree that there's an intuition here, that he's working on. And no, he's not going to be able to convince Boromir based on that. And I think it's pretty clear he doesn't expect to convince anybody of this. I think that's why he's reaching for such weak arguments. He can't give any argument better than, we don't know for a fact that it's going to be a disaster, right? We don't know for a fact that the dwarves are all dead. We don't know for a fact that the place is crawling with orcs. It really might not be. Yeah. And I agree, JJ, that comparing and contrasting Boromir and Edmund from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as the resistant member of the party and the basis of their resistance would be interesting. Right. As Matt points out, the irony, of course, is that the Gap of Rohan is crawling with Uruk-hai. Yes, exactly. Boromir's knowledge of the state of things in Rohan is a little bit outdated, right? So, okay. But back to the first part of Gandalf's statement here. You speak of what you do not know when you liken Moria to the stronghold of Sauron. I alone of you have ever been in the dungeons of the Dark Lord, and only in his older and lesser dwelling in Dol Guldur. Those who pass the gates of Barad-dûr do not return, but I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. Okay. So, I was suggesting that Boromir's comparison of entering Moria with knocking on the gates of Barad-dûr was tipping his hand a little bit. At the very least betraying, if not actively hinting at Boromir's belief that their whole quest is a really, really dumb idea. But as I was pointing out again just recently here, earlier today, he's not creating dissension. Boromir is still, even though he's now speaking against Gandalf more openly and more fully than he ever has, he's still not causing a rift. He's not undermining Gandalf's authority. He is objecting to Gandalf's plan. And he's doing that openly. But he's not saying, I think that Gandalf is, we've seen enough of Gandalf and I nominate myself for new leader of this company, right? He's definitely not doing that. He's not undermining the hierarchy. He's not trying even to undermine confidence in Gandalf himself, right? What he's doing, however, is he's being indirect. The shade that he's throwing, the implication, the seed that he is planting, that this whole going to Mordor thing is actually insane, it's still there. He's being indirect about it, but it's still there. Gandalf's response is equally indirect. Notice what he says. Boromir, you don't know what you're talking about. And notice how he attacks Boromir's argument. Yeah, going through Moria sounds completely hopeless. You know how hopeless? As hopeless as, I don't know, trying to walk into Mordor. That's how hopeless, right? And Gandalf's response is, yeah, I've done that, actually, right? I have been in the dungeons of the Dark Lord. And by implication, I got out again, right? What you are saying by implication is a hopeless thing. I've accomplished something quite like it in the past before. You speak of what you do not know. You don't understand how this works out. And let me give you a glimpse of this, right? Okay. Notice that he also distracts. He diverts attention away. He responds to Boromir's statement, but he does so in such a way as to distract attention away from the thing that Boromir emphasized. Boromir emphasized their journey, right? Our being led by Gandalf into Moria is as bad an idea as, I don't know, in theory, Gandalf leading us into Mordor to knock on the gates of the Dark Tower. I know that's not really the plan. They're going to sneak, right? But still, like, just putting that out there, right? That it would be as crazy as that. Oh, wait, isn't that what we're doing? Yeah, kind of was your plan, wasn't it, Gandalf? But notice what Gandalf does. Gandalf does not focus on either his leadership or on, not right away, I mean, or on the path that they are going to be taking, right? Again, remember Boromir's words are, to enter Moria would be to walk into a trap. Hardly better. Like, are we walking into a trap? Where are we walking into? We're walking into Moria. We're walking into Mordor. these are among Gandalf's plans, right? Gandalf doesn't talk about their walking. He just talks about the destinations, right? You speak of what you do not know when you liken Moria to the stronghold of Sauron. Let's just think about your comparisons. Let's not think about where we may or may not be walking, because that could threaten morale pretty significantly. Instead, let's think about the destinations. You just said that Moria was like Barad-dûr. Or rather, to be perfectly just to Boromir, if Sauron should be watching even the unlikely roads, then Moria under guard is like Barad-dûr. And Gandalf says, no, it's not like that at all. When you really look at that, that's a silly comparison. And his immediate emphasis is not just to explode the parallel, to explode the comparison, but to emphasize Boromir's ignorance. You don't know what you're talking about. And he doesn't emphasize his ignorance about Moria. He could, right? He could be like, oh, come, let us count the ways in which Moria is different from Barad-dûr, right? It's nothing like that at all. In fact, Boromir, come on now, right? But that's not where he goes. Instead, he says, you speak of what you don't know because you don't know the gates of Barad-dûr. You don't know anything about the the stronghold of Sauron, right? The stronghold of Sauron is a concept to you, right? Have you ever been in Mordor, Boromir? Have you ever been to Barad-dûr? Pretty sure you haven't, on account of you're still here, right? I have been in the dungeons of the Dark Lord. I have in fact successfully infiltrated the stronghold of Sauron previously, right? Yes, it was his B-list stronghold, right? But I infiltrated it, nevertheless. Now, Barad-dûr, nothing like that, right? Barad-dûr is worse. And yes, I saw people asking about his older and lesser dwelling. Why would he call it his older dwelling? Because yes, Barad-dûr was rebuilt recently. But I think not only that. It's where he was before. In an earlier stage of Sauron, just thinking from the perspective of the Third Age, because that's what we care about here, in an earlier stage of Sauron's plans, of his development, right? Sauron's own power was lesser before he reestablished himself, moved back to Mordor, and reestablished himself in his center of power again, right? Yeah. So, so that it makes sense for him to call it, for that reason, both the older and the lesser dwelling. Those who pass the gates of Barad-dûr do not return. Why does he say that? He says that he is asserting authority about Sauron's strongholds, right? And I think he is here responding to give a sort of Gandalfian paraphrase. Don't be a fool, right? We are not knocking at the gate. We're not planning to knock at the gates of Barad-dûr, Boromir, right? That's not how this is going to go down. I'm not sure how this is going to go down, but I don't think it's going that way, right? Those who pass the gates of Barad-dûr do not return. Don't think I'm naive, right? And again, this is one of those places where you think back, of course, to Boromir's famous speech in the movie, right? Nobody walks into Mordor speech, right? And his whole description of what Mordor is like, which again, I don't think Boromir has ever seen, in fact. But in the movie, they have to explain all this, right? Because they're assuming that most of the people watching the movie aren't going to have the faintest idea what Mordor is, right? In the book, Gandalf makes it clear that he does not need, he does not need Boromir to, to Gondor-splain this to him, right? He knows what knocking at the gates of Barad-dûr is, and he's just shown that he knows much, much better than Boromir himself what that would mean. One of the things that I think he is saying here to Boromir is, look, don't make the mistake of thinking that I have supported and am going along with and indeed leading the expedition into Mordor out of ignorance, right? It is not ignorance. I know more of Sauron and the stronghold of Sauron than you do. But knowing what I know, which is more than you, I'm doing it. I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. Right? That is the statement. I am leading the way because there is hope. Is there Amdir? No. I can give you nothing but uncertainty and a fool's hope that maybe it's going to pan out. Right. Yeah. And Islamur, I agree that Gandalf is saying that Boromir doesn't know Gandalf that well. Yes, exactly. You do. You seem to have gotten the impression that I'm incompetent, when in fact I'm just operating on a totally different level from you here, right? I'm seeing things that you don't see. I'm anticipating things that you're not anticipating. I get that it doesn't make sense to you. I kind of understand your own frame of reference and how from within your frame of reference, the things I'm saying aren't making sense. And probably the things that Elrond said in the Council of Elrond aren't making sense to you either. I get that, right? But I want you to, on some level, recognize, right, that there's more going on here. Right. Bjarnason and I agree that it's true that Boromir is used to being the most informed person in the room, but he's very much not that here. Yeah, exactly. Boromir is no wizard's pupil. That is exactly right. Emily, it's hard to say the extent to which Boromir shares Denethor's contempt of wizards, or of Mithrandir specifically. All I can say is that Boromir's early, meeting of Gandalf, like when Boromir was younger, as Faramir remembers, does not seem to have filled him with awe, right? He is not has not at any point acted towards Gandalf as if he's showing any kind of deference to Gandalf, right? Can we go as far as saying that he has inherited his father's suspicions? I don't think we have much reason to say that yet. I think that what we can see is the absence of evidence that he treats Gandalf with reverence or respect. I mean, it's not that he treats him with disrespect, but again, with any special respect, as it sounds like Faramir probably would. Okay. So again, the two sentences I come back to that seem to me most important here. I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. And, however it may prove, one must tread the path that need chooses. That's if Gandalf's making an argument, that's his pro Moria argument right there. I am leading you into Moria. I wouldn't do this if there were no hope. Do you not see any hope in our coming out again? You just have to trust me. I mean, he is playing his own, not exactly authority card, but his own, like, Gandalf is cashing in some chips here. Not just with Boromir, but with everybody in the party, right? Everyone in the company. If you have any trust for me at all, then hear me now. I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. Yes, the name of Moria is black. Yes, there might be orcs there. Yes, there are probably orcs there. No, there's probably not any help. The dwarves are probably dead. We all know this, but we don't know those things. You know, we don't know those things are true for a fact. But most importantly, you can trust me, right? You can trust me that I wouldn't do this if there were no hope. What grounds do I have? Should I share with you the grounds for hope that I have? Asks Gandalf. Well, here, I can give you some crumbs of Umdir. We don't know for a fact that it's crawling with orcs. It might not be. Does that help? No? Okay. Hang on, let me try again. There's a remote chance that some of the dwarves still survive. It's possible. Can't absolutely rule it out. Does that help? No? Then try this, which is all there is anyway. One must tread the path that need chooses. This is the path. Our path has been laid this way, as Sam is going to say later. And yes, I think that Sam on the stairs of Cirathungol is slant quoting Gandalf here. Sam will come to a clearer understanding that in the end, you don't really choose your own path. The path is laid in a certain way, and your only choice is, do you tread it or not? Do you go forward, or do you go through Moria, or do you go back to Rivendell? Right? Yeah. So, however it may prove, whether they're dwarves or not, whether they're orcs or not, one must tread the path that need chooses. This is the option that we've been given. Do we do it? I think we can't do anything else. Given that we set out on this quest in the first place, it's not like this has decreased our hopes. Our hopes were in the toilet to begin with, right? But you know, we still must leave forward, and I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. He is saying, I have hope. I have hope. Which I believe there to be 100% Estelle. That's why he can't support it with good Umdir arguments. He instead just gives the two bad Umdir arguments. Yeah. Fourth Dauntless, 100% agree. We should come back to this scene when Faramir tries to dissuade Frodo from approaching Cirathungol. Yes, there will be a very closely parallel situation. Yep. Yeah. Now, Josh, I hear you. I hear you, that logic. This is a really important point, and it's picking up on things we were talking about before too. He says, I don't think Gandalf's proven anything other than that you can't rule out Moria just because it's a terrible idea. But by the same logic, you can't rule out the Gap of Rohan because it's also a terrible idea. Agreed. Or the road down to the south, which is an equally, but for a different reason, terrible idea. Yeah, completely. Completely. I agree. This is where I come back to what I was saying before about intuition, right? Even by saying one must tread the path that need chooses, by talking about need, right? I think that Gandalf is trying to simplify things. Remember how he phrased it when he was rejecting the Gap of Rohan. He said, the Gap of Rohan is closed to us so long as we go with the bearer. It's closed to us. Like Karathras has been closed, right? He is putting the Gap of Rohan into the same bucket as Karathras, right? Karathras it's physically impassable. It is not possible for us to cross over the mountains. That's clear, right? There is not, Josh, just as you suggest, there is not an equal impossibility of going to the Gap of Rohan. It's just really dangerous and would be really foolish to bring the ring so close to Saruman. That would be very, very foolish. But then again, so is going through Moria, right? So I agree. I totally agree with that. Again, this is why I believe Gandalf knows the kind of Amdir that he has. Sorry, I keep saying the wrong thing. The kind of Estelle that he has. The reading of Providence that he's doing. The reading of the patterns of the music. The intuition that he and Elrond are both operating on is something that they know not everybody's going to succeed. Remember what Frodo says when Gandalf talks about Providence back in chapter 2? And suggests that the idea that Providence is leading this direction might be comforting, right? And Frodo's like, it is not a comforting thought, right? Frodo is not comforted by that at all, right? Yeah, I agree, Josh. That's what I'm getting around to trying to explain. Josh is just saying, we just have to trust Gandalf because he's got Providence in his ear. I'm cool with that, but that's not the argument he keeps making. Yes, exactly. That's what I'm trying to get at. The difference between what it appears his convictions are based on and what he's actually saying. Both times, both the gap is closed to us and one must tread the path that need chooses. In both cases, he is trying to make it sound like this is the only option. This bad option is our only option. And so as bad as it might seem, it's still better than nothing. It's still better than 100% guaranteed defeat and failure, which is what going back to Rivendell means. Right. Why doesn't Gandalf just make the statement clearer? Why doesn't he just say, have Estelle, folks. Trust me. Providence is leading us in this direction. Some other power is at work here. It'll work out. Why doesn't he just say that? I think he doesn't say that because he knows there's no point in saying that. Like they can't see it. They'll come to see it. Again, Sam and Frodo will both of them understand this by the end of the story. Even Merry and Pippin will come to understand this much better by the time they get to the end of the story, right? But they don't. He knows he's not going to convince anybody making that argument. Even at the council, there wasn't any convincing that happened. There was just Elrond's assertion, we must send the ring to the fire. Parentheses, trust me. Right. And yes, Dolorous Stroke, I agree, that's very important. He needs to persuade them and have them trust in have them trust in him without promising a happy ending. Yeah, absolutely, because that is totally not guaranteed, right? Yeah. Yes. He's not promising that at all. because he's listened to the music for a long time. He knows how this works. And again, Sam himself is going to come to understand how the fact that stories don't always have happy endings, at least not what people in the stories would call a happy ending, how that is relevant to their position, right? Yeah. I think Sphinx, I'm looking at Sphinx and Lupita, who are talking about stuff here about free will. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go back a stage. So Aspen was saying, I have discomfort about need. Could it turn into means justify the ends? In some ways. Sphinx was saying, yes, that's why it matters whether we're sacrificing ourselves as willing volunteers or forcing others to die. Yes, agreed. Lupita was then saying her problem is with must, with all the value put in free will. As I agree, much emphasis was placed on that. But remember what that means. The free will, the will that was important was, are you going to walk the road or not? Are you willing to take this burden on yourself? Again, it's exactly not. It's so funny. I find the Peter Jackson movies of The Lord of the Rings so amazing because I love them. And I think they do a marvelous, marvelous adaptation job. But so many times, when I'm looking carefully at the book, I'm like, it's exactly the opposite of what Peter Jackson did with it. And this is one. Free will is not putting Frodo at the front of the party and making him choose whether they take the left or the right hand turning, or pretend to be the one choosing the left or right hand turning, right? That's not free will. That's not the kind of free will we're talking about. The kind of free will we're talking about, the kind of free will that's important here is, yes, I will take this on myself. I will be the bearer of the ring. Yes, I'm going to go forward instead of back. Again, your path is laid in a particular way. There's only so much choice you actually have about how things go, right? But you do have a choice on whether you go forward or whether you go back, right? Again, both and Elrond and Gandalf and also Sam later on are going to be thinking about this, right? Gandalf is telling them, we need to go this way. Again, Gandalf's not lying exactly. Josh, I'm still kind of thinking, because Josh, you are absolutely not wrong. You are absolutely not wrong that one could very easily say whatever Gandalf wants to say about Moria could equally well be said about the Gap of Rohan. Right. But I think that what he's not giving them all the explanations here. He's not saying, look, this is my intuition. This is where we need to go. Remember, he said to Aragorn, and he just said at the beginning of this conversation that his heart told him they were going to be going this way all along. He's had an intuition about Moria from the very beginning. He thought this was the way, even though it never didn't seem like a dumb idea, Right. And yeah, he does talk about needing to disappear. That's a reason. That's like one of the pro Moria arguments, right? It's not really a reasons why we think we'll survive argument, but it's a reason to do it argument. Gandalf, though, is Gandalf and Tolkien also are both of them, more or less at the same time, very unwilling to just point to Providence openly, to just say, dude, have faith. Remember the comment that Gandalf makes that I always think is hilariously funny, to Frodo in The Shadow of the Past, when he says, I can put it no plainer than to say that Bilbo was meant to find the ring. No plainer? Not possible? Can't you, though? Couldn't you, if you tried really hard, put it just a touch plainer than that? Right? But no. He can't be, apparently, plainer than that. Right? And he's not being plainer than that here, either. He's not hiding it. He's not lying to them, and he's not hiding it. But he doesn't go there. He never is plainer than that. So Josh, at the end of the day, he is simply saying, and again, this is one of the things I think he's setting up with the whole Stronghold of Sauron thing, in part, is trust me. Trust me. One must tread the path that need chooses. Need has chosen this. Any counter argument you might want to make, Josh, right, about the Gap of Rohan, right? No. Trust me. Trust me. This is Need's choice. Anyway, okay. With that, I think we should end for today. We'll see where we go from here, of course. It's almost time for Aragorn to say his piece again, which, given the last rather discouraging thing Mr. Estelle said, will be interesting to see in the context of that. All right, so thanks everybody for joining us. It's field trip time. Glad you guys could all be here. For those of you who are here just for the book discussion, thanks for joining us. For everyone else, let's go on the field trip. Here, let me fix my game here, which I'm going to have to redo. There we go. All right.
Good evening.
Good evening, Valoria. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Am I coming in all right?
Yes. Yes, you are.
All right. So where are we off to today?
Same farm.
Same farm.
Same
Okay.
farm. We're still have one, maybe two more sessions with that farm as our home base. It's an extremely convenient home base.
Let's see. Still adding people to the raid.
All right. So let me look at the map in just a second here as I'm coming back in. So yeah, we'll kind of review. Because without the map, I'm going to mess up all the names. So
So I was thinking about Boromir on this one, and I think something a lot of us can relate to now, after the
Uh-huh.
last 3 years, is the fact that this entire time Boromir's been in survival mode,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Sure.
that just does a lot to your ability to plan ahead. It's just your, I mean, it's made him resourceful. We can see that he's incredibly savvy when it comes to, getting around and stuff, and just
Yeah.
making quick decisions that can save lives.
And that's of course
But
even true in a broader sense, right? Like his country is on the brink of destruction, right? Gondor is in survival mode. He's the captain of he's the captain general of the armies of Gondor, and Gondor is in survival mode, right? And has been
mhm.
for years. So yes, it's very extreme times, extreme circumstances, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So, but with that resourcefulness comes sort of a sense of, I don't know, almost scrupulousness,
mm-hmm.
and just judgment calls that make sense in the moment, but might not make sense long term.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and some things that seem important are gonna longer term consequences, right?
Hmm.
Um, Using the ring is a really bad idea because the long term consequences of using the ring could be really bad. That's a hard argument. That argument's not going to play real well with somebody who's like, yeah, but we're being destroyed today, right?
Hmm.
Anyway, okay. Looking at the map here in Cardolan.
So, yeah,
So
sorry.
we've been in Skurlock Farm here, or we've been starting from Skurlock Farm. We've been going clockwise around Skurlock Farm. We were down in Nimbarth last time, and we were looking at ruins across this little inlet across into Sedgemead. So that's what we're going to do. So today we're going to go back to Skurlock. We're going to head down to Nimbarth, and then we're going to, from that perspective, cross and see. If I'm trying to get a sense of the sort of economy of the ruins down here to see if we can get a sense of what this area was back in the older days. So we're gonna look through Sedgemead a little bit there at the ruins there, and then we'll head back. We'll head down towards Tharbad.
Yeah,
That's not gonna
it
happen
looks like
tonight.
we're all assembled here at Skurlock.
You are, yeah. Sorry, I was just looking at the map and I'm not there yet.
That's
So
all right.
here
I've
I'm
been trying
coming.
to add you to the raid to no success. So,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I apologize. I was looking at a different screen. Um,
okay.
I'm here.
Right. I gotta wait till you finish loading.
Okay,
Oh, there you are. Okay.
here I am.
Okay.
Okay,
Let me add you to the raid real quick so we can follow you.
absolutely. Okay. All right, so we're heading back south again towards Nimbarth, whose tower we can see right off there in the distance. And as I recall, we wanted to get not down. I tried to go down that canyon and it didn't end well. Oops, but it's going to
Yeah.
end better than going way up here, from which there is no
Oh, here.
returning. Yeah, okay. I think it's further
We
down.
got our.
No, right,
Yeah,
that's
we
the
got our.
ravine down there. There's the river
Oh, yeah.
inlet down there.
Got our own
Yeah.
little
the
red
menu.
horn. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right, so yes, as I recall, we went down this left-hand side, the east bank of that little inlet, to get to Nimbarth last time, and we ended up having to go over this little hill because there was no way down. Yes, that's a ravine there was no way down into. So we ended up going over. There again, we can see the ruins.
Oh, yeah.
So we go over this little rise and then down into Nimbarth.
Oh. There we go.
Okay, here we are. There is Nimbarth. So
Whoa.
down we go. All right, so actually just looking from here,
Yeah, nice view.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the ruins on the west bank of this little inlet that we didn't get to last time. So we were
Hmm.
looking at Nimbarth itself off in the distance there, and its towers, and we could see there was definitely older stuff and some newer stuff. Rowan, that tower does look a bit like a lighthouse. We were looking at it from a little too close up to notice that last time, but it does look like it may have possibly been a lighthouse. I
Makes sense.
agree, Rowan. I think that it mostly. My suspicion is that this probably was that lighthouse might have been original, like just that there would be a lighthouse on the river here for the ships coming up makes a certain amount of sense, and that this whole little port mini city would grow up around it makes sense. That seemed to happen during the days of Arnor of old seems very likely based just on the rationale of things. Remember, one of the questions I was asking was why would they build this little port town when they already had Tharbad, which was their major port, just a little bit further down the river. But anyway, then there's but I said there's this other stuff across the river that I wanted to see if we could get a sense of the role of this darn it what Nimbarth. Yeah, I've already forgotten the name of the town we're looking at. A, a little bit more about what we can learn about Nimbarth by looking at the these ruins across the way, and then working our way over towards Tharbad. So again, we can try to see, can we understand in any way the relationship between Nimbarth and Tharbad in Arnor of old, and how that might have been sort of involved and incorporated into the newer kingdom of Cardolan.
Certainly, yeah. Well, let's use the remains of daylight while we still have it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we don't have too much of it, do we? All right. I think that many of the... I'm trying to... Okay, hang on. At the risk of taking a little bit more time. Looking up at that lighthouse tower. Do we think that's newer or older?
Oh.
'Cause I'm kind of thinking newer.
I haven't seen that design before, and it doesn't look like any of the beacons up north we've seen.
No, like the oldest stuff here is all of the like gazebo platform kind of variety here.
Yeah. Not those
I
little
think
fluted
that
bits
tower
at the
is
side.
newer. I don't see like, you know, one of the Cardolan towers would be a smoking gun, and I don't see any architectural smoking gun on that tower. But it looks newer to me.
Yeah, I haven't seen that fluted design on the side
No,
before.
it's very unusual. Yeah.
Is that an oil reserve? What is that?
Yeah, I don't know. But
Maybe a bell? An alarm bell?
it does look like it could be if it's not a lighthouse, it could be a bell tower.
Like a carillon or something.
It could be a bell tower. And which would mean that this was not just a trading post, but a post from which advanced warning would be given to some extent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see what we see.
Yeah.
So from here, this is where I wanted to cross, because there was I remember we were looking at a little bridge. There's a little bridge, or the ruins of a bridge, up this away. As we left Nimbarth and we're heading inland, we got some ruins over there. We got some, where was the bridge? There's the bridge business.
There's the bridge. Yep.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah,
we're
it almost
leaving.
looks like a harmonica laid sideways, like the wind's gonna whip through there and make some kind of like whistling noise.
Right. Okay. So all right. So we're leaving Nimbarth and we're heading. this bridge, one makes a bridge like this on a road. So the question is,
Oh, mind the gap.
Yeah, mind the gap indeed. Wow. Well, that's really kind of pulled away from...
Yeah, it's
all
mooring.
right, so the question first is, what road was this? Like, between what and what?
Huh.
It could be Nimbarth, that you go upstream, up the inlet from Nimbarth until it gets narrow enough. I mean, it's a little bit wider further down. You could have built it a little further south than this, but whatever. I'm not going to nitpick. If you build the bridge up here, it would be equally convenient to go to. Remember the Everstead? That was the name of it up here. The little. So it would go to Everstead and down to Nimbarth. It would serve both almost equally from here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that makes a certain amount of sense. Okay. So where's it going to on the other side?
That's a good question. Maybe it's just safe harbor?
Maybe.
Ah!
Noggin stones? Okay.
Noggin stone.
Noggin stones?
What does that mean?
Strange. What a peculiar name. Okay,
Big
so we immediately get...
Here.
All right. The columns flanking either side of this road.
Mm-hmm. Whoa, big word. That's a diseased one. I'd hate to see a well one.
Yeah. Okay, what are we seeing here?
Oh, big rib cages.
Columns along the side.
Yep.
And then up to...
Little gazebo plinth thing over here.
What was this stuff? Towers?
I don't know. It looks like a rock slide or some kind of a mudslide took care of most of it.
Yeah.
I can't tell what most of this was supposed to be.
I think this hall up here with the large bones out in front of it I think this is new.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is new. I think these brown collapsed towers with the wooden beams sticking out of them are newer. And again, by new, I still mean, only 1,000 years old.
Yeah. What kind of creature has antlers like that? I don't think we've seen anything that looks like this creature.
And that head is not proportionate to these rib cages or femurs anyway.
Yeah. That looks like the big stags you get in...
what is up with that helm?
I don't know.
Random,
it's like
enormous helmet sitting here.
Looks like a dwarf helmet. And there's markings on this stone I don't think we've seen before.
Huh.
Looks like a sun motif.
Yeah.
And a dwarven head. Or a bearded head with a helmet.
Maybe. I think that these designs, they are different. It does look like, yes, I agree, like a helmeted bearded head. And then a sun motif, I agree. But I think it's meant to convey the style, like the Paleolithic, like the Barrow Downs style.
Yes. It matches the helmet more correctly, though. Oh, and there's a big shield and a sword back there, too.
What? There's another helmet.
More markings. Here. More just little circular pips decorating a spiral motif.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes me want to get a look at Enedwaith again now.
Yeah. Yeah, this would fit Mammoth. Mammoth would have ribs this size.
Or an Auroch, maybe.
I don't think so. I think it's too big for an Aurochs.
It's too big. You think it's a Mumuk?
I think it's a Mumuk or one of the mammoths from the north. Which I still want to ride, just saying.
Yeah, seriously.
But what matters most, what matters more than exactly what animal these came from, is the fact that these bones seem to have been arranged by the ancient people who erected these stones, which clearly, no matter which epoch this building is from, massively predate anything else.
Yeah.
And yet, when this building was built, these sites remained undisturbed, even though cozied right up against the outside of some care was taken in this construction not to disturb these sites.
It makes me wonder if maybe these sites were defiled early on, but then after some great tragedy, they were restored as like maybe an apology. Because I don't see how it would survive this destruction unless it came afterwards.
It is difficult. So you're thinking this might be a Paleolithic reconstruction by somebody?
Yeah, like, they just sort of put the buildings here and they just cleared it away and threw it in the rubbish bin, and then all hell started breaking loose, literally, and they just like, okay, here it is, here's your skull back, here's your rib cage back, are we good?
Yeah, based on previous records, we think there was an antlered skull, more or less, here, and
I wonder if these are giant rib cage. We've seen giants up in the north. But
the humanoid giants.
Yeah, the humanoid giants.
Possibly. The key thing is, whatever it is, it doesn't live around here nowadays, right?
No.
There isn't any creature in Cardolan, the Trollshaws, the Lone Lands, anywhere around here.
Yeah, it's like every ghost story you hear. They found this place, they found a really interesting skull, and they stuck it up over the mantelpiece, and now the house is cursed.
Yeah.
Very Borley Rectory,
Okay. Now, we've seen the people of Cardolan. Okay. I think, wow, this opens up an entirely new frontier. We have seen the people of New Cardolan building their cities in the middle of ancient burial grounds.
Mm-hmm.
Up there in Tirn Gorthad and Dol Irnil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially Tirn Gorthad. Gorthad, sorry. So this is now raising the new possibility that I hadn't even really considered when we were there. Did they build it around it, or did they just build them? Did they, in fact, reconstruct those burial grounds and all of those standing stones and everything? Did the Numenorians, did the Cardolan folks themselves erect all of those standing stones and hinges and burial
based
grounds
on what
and
they
things?
think the paganism might have been, or based on their
Yes.
observations? We sort
Was
of
it like
recreating history, like the Victorians and the Iron Maidens and stuff.
Yeah, was it like a reconstructionist move? Was it like a pagan revival movement in Cardolan?
It would explain why all of the burial sites we've seen were in such good condition.
Yes.
I'd say it's probably a mix of the two. There were probably some genuine old burial grounds there, and then they just started to ape them. But this is like nothing we've seen yet.
And the thing that really suggests that to me here is the way they're built flush up against the walls. Like, because if you look at the whole thing, right, like this one with the two sets of ribs, and
Yeah.
there's like a hollow space inside,
Yeah.
right?
But it
Here?
seems spilling out of the ruins too.
Exactly. So I mean that means that this whole thing, like this whole thing that I'm standing on, these rocks I'm standing on right here that are up against the walls, are part of it, right?
Yeah.
This is not, and it was built up against the walls. This couldn't have been a freestanding thing, and then we're gonna snuggle our walls right up against it. Like that's not possible.
Yeah. A bit ludicrous when you
Clearly,
think of it that way.
yeah, clearly this was built after the walls.
Yeah.
Has to have been. That wasn't true. At least it didn't strike me in any of the places that we saw in Tirn Gorthod.
Yeah, they weren't
Yeah.
like organically fused.
Right. I mean, we were, even at that time, asking questions like, why would you build your city smack in the middle of, this old burial ground? Like, what, why would you integrate the burial ground into your city? But
Well,
what if they didn't? What if
yeah.
instead they built faux nouveau burial grounds?
Well, and the other question is, and Anulari study comes up with a good thing here. It says we have intelligent works, and that's similar to what I was thinking too. I mean, we do know the works are somewhat sentient. You don't suppose this is something they set up, or just found
Yeah.
and started putting bones at. Like maybe the runes were put here by the Cardolingians or restored by the Cardolingians, but the bones could have. I don't know. It definitely seems more doggy in nature.
Yeah. I'm coming around to the other side here.
We don't know much about their practices, if any.
No, none of them would.
Ooh, werewolves? I don't think. Have we really seen werewolves yet? I haven't got to Moria
Werewolves.
yet. No.
I don't think we have.
Do we know what Noggin Stones means?
No.
Could be a reference to those stones there, the carved ones.
Yeah, it well could. Okay. Everything I'm seeing up here. So I am pretty close to 100% convinced that this is all new. This is all Cardolan stuff. And the thing that convinces me more than anything else is the nouveau Paleolithic burial grounds.
Mm-hmm.
That weird affinities with cults of death is associated with a decline in Numenorian society is
Yep.
clearly established. That the people of Cardolan had gone in the creepy necromantic direction. We already had reason to suspect that from the various necropolises we have found already in this area, and more importantly, all of that weird burial ground stuff that was going on in Tirn Gorthod, which we know to have been their capital.
Yeah, the necromania.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm the opposite of shocked to find the evidence that we found here that they were building their own, old burial sites.
Do you think at this point they're making up stuff, though? Or do you think this is based on some stuff they found here?
There might be real archaeology involved. It's possible. Oh, look, another bridge. There
We'll have
could
to
be
see
real
if we see
archaeology
any more like
involved.
that.
Yeah.
But Two
But
broken bridges.
yeah, exactly. Got another one here.
That seems like carelessness. Sorry.
Oscar Wilde reference?
Yes.
Yes, yes. I love that line.
Thank you.
It's an importance of being earnest line for those who don't know it. To lose one parent might be. Oh, what did she say? Might be
considered a tragedy.
might be considered a tragedy, but to lose both your parents begins to look like carelessness. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So once again, the road is not here. But I think all of this stuff, I'm not seeing much evidence of too much of anything that is clearly old Arnor down here.
Yeah.
But I might change my mind over here on the other side of the bridge. Oops, it's late.
Yeah, I agree, Amathorn. Aragorn's inherited quite an infrastructure problem.
Yes, for sure.
Definitely have a minister of transportation.
Golly. What the heck?
Whoa, Nelly. It's an Umphalos.
I was not expecting this.
Me neither. Is this a
Okay.
fountain?
Maybe? Weird. Very weird. Hang on a second. I'm not looking more closely at it because we're like totally out of time. What I'm wanting to do is go up to higher ground, if I can make it to higher ground, and look about to see, oh yeah, are there other ruins close by? Yes.
Oh, man.
I'm going with yes, there are. So,
Good gravy.
wow, there's a lot over here. This whole southern coast. And that's still Nimbarth there with the lighthouse / bell tower. Okay, wow. All right, so there's a lot here. We'll continue our exploration of Sedgemead next time. But I feel like I'm beginning to get a picture here. But we'll keep fleshing it out.
I have
But
more
we'll
questions than answers.
Yeah, next time we'll start with this weird thing here. I'm also remind me to talk about, look how this place looks like it was burned.
Yep.
And we've seen several ruins in Carnarvon that look like they bear the memory of flames. Remind me to talk about that next time. I'm developing a theory.
Okay.
Yeah, developing a theory.
Theory of fire.
Okay.
Got it.
All right. But yeah, we'll look through the rest of Sedgemead, which was apparently a metropolis once upon a time, as we continue working our way through towards Tharbad. I had no idea there was so much stuff down here. Wow. Okay. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Really fun, fascinating discoveries. The archaeology we did today, really, that was a classic find here today. But anyway, thanks for joining us, and we will see you guys. I should be here next week. I got a couple weeks in a row. I'll be going away again later on this summer, but I should be here, as far as I know, for the next couple weeks. So looking forward to seeing you guys again next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.